Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas Touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is, pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas Touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, and with me, as always, is my co-host, the Memphis Dream, Mark Tipton.
The Memphis Dream. Oh, I do like that one. Given my great appreciation for the history of Memphis wrestling and all that, and the dream you're referencing to the late, great American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. So I like that on both ways. So this may be my favorite name yet. I appreciate that. This week, we want to do something that, at least what I'm hoping will be kind of a light-hearted edition of the 30-Minute Midas Touch podcast. We want to talk about an aspect of pro wrestling, and that it's kind of an inside baseball, I suppose, because it's about presentations of wrestlers in terms of their ring names and personas and such and so forth, that was designed not only to entertain the audience, but to also kind of take a jab, if you will, at another wrestler or another wrestling promotion or something of that nature. What in wrestling is referred to as a rib of some sort. In this case, a lighthearted rib. And so I guess we could just start with, is there one in particular you want to start things off with?
Yeah, I mean, the one that really just immediately jumped out at me when I kind of thought of this topic was Akeem, the African Dream. You know, that gimmick was based on Dusty Rhodes. It was based, you know, he was the American Dream, but a lot of people felt like he was acting black. You know what I mean? So what does Vince McMahon do? He creates Akeem, the African Dream, and has one-man gang go out there and do all the same kind of juck and jive kind of stuff that Dusty was doing, and kind of talk like Dusty was doing, and stuff like that. And of course, as a kid, I didn't get that.
No.
But like later on, and when I heard that, or like I was like, oh, how did I miss that? You know what I mean?
Right.
But I mean, that was one of the big ones that really just kind of stuck out to me.
Well, yeah, because, you know, and for those of you who remember, now I know this is some time ago, and younger member of the audience may not remember, but the wrestler whose actual name I do forget, was known for many years as the One-Man Gang. He was really a very, a bully, a monster. He was a monstrous man.
His finish was called the 747.
Yes, because he would, it was a plane crashing on you.
Yeah.
And so he was very feared, but this was a stage where he was really coming toward the latter part of his career. And apparently Vince McMahon saw this as an opportunity to kind of repackage the former one-man gang into a very different role and kind of get in a shot at Dusty Rhodes, which is something that happened more than once in the history of professional wrestling.
Well, also, too, I think I remember hearing one-man gang say that Vince pretty much like just gave him an ultimatum. It's like, well, I mean, either you do this or you're fired. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like one of those things. And he's like, because he pitched it, hey, I want you to do this, I want you to dance, I want you to do the African Dream, blah blah blah. And he's like, I don't know, I want to be the one man gang.
Well, yeah.
Obviously, and
that's what
he's
he's
like,
been for much of his career.
Well, right now, one man gang doesn't have a spot. Akeem does.
Right.
So there you go. He started dancing and jiving. So.
And ultimately, this is professional wrestling.
Right.
He wanted to make a living.
Yep. And like you're talking about, this is not the first time. Dusty, let's continue on Dusty here for a second.
All right.
Obviously Dusty, he was, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, biggest babyface of the Crockett's, Vince's main competition for years. And as soon as he gets to WWF, what do? They put him in polka dots.
Yes, they did.
As a rib on him to, hey, don't worry about being a booker, don't worry about being a main event guy, just go out there, have fun. We're gonna make you, basically they're trying to make him a joke,
Right.
But in essence, what Dusty did was he got the polka dots over,
right,
and now it's synonymous with him, and not in any way like a negative thing towards him. You know what I mean? Like it almost took on a life of its own.
Right, and you may have heard the disdain in my voice as you brought this subject up. As I mentioned, was a long-term Dusty Rhodes fan, and recognized him as a world champion caliber competitor. And then hearing him come to the WF, I thought, oh, well, this will be great, against all you guys and see what he does there. And I see him come out in what I consider to be a ridiculous outfit.
Right.
There's no way I could. And I thought you'd take someone that was, a main event level performer, and you make him go out there and look like that.
Yeah, and that was WWF's, go-to. I mean, they did that with Ronnie Garvin, too. That's
right.
That was the one as a kid that I just didn't get, because I remember those Ronnie Garvin Ric Flair matches.
Yes.
And how hard-hitting they were, and how intense they were, and how believable, even as a kid, I believed in Ronnie Garvin, the Hands of Stone, you know what I mean? And then when he came to WWF, he was having 3-minute matches with Greg Valentine. You know what I mean? It's like, it just, to me, it didn't compute. It didn't make WWF look bigger or better than the Crockett's time. It just, I don't know what it did. In my mind, it was just like something was wrong, something was off.
Well, and I will admit, in my mind, it made them look kind of petty, to be very frank. Because it looked, hey, you were somebody who had success somewhere else. You weren't something we created, so we're going to kind of take you down a notch.
Yeah. I mean, and let me say this before we talk about this in the wrestling politics and stuff like that. There's good politics and bad politics. You know what I mean? If someone has an attitude or something like that, let's take them down a notch. And if they think they're a big star, they're not. They don't know what they are dealing with here. But yeah, in some cases, why not ride someone's popularity for the betterment of your company? Which, going back to, like I said, someone's being taken down a notch.
Yes.
So the story goes that when Terry Taylor went and met Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard, or whoever he met for his initial meetings with WWF,
yes,
that they thought he was the cock of the walk. And hence was born the Red Rooster.
Oh, you're hitting all my favorites this
time.
Yeah.
And like we said, Terry Taylor, a phenomenal worker, but, he did have a reputation early in his career at being a little brash, maybe unwarranted at that point, for considering how long he had been in the business. And they took that opportunity to make him the Red Rooster and, give him, like you said, Dusty's ridiculous outfit, but gave him
just top that.
Yeah, gave him a ridiculous haircut.
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh, yes.
The red stripe, the what is that called?
I guess you called it a faux hawk.
I don't know if it's even that. A cock hawk?
But anyway, it was, for those of you who didn't see it, in the center of his head, his hair was spiked up and cut in a way and dyed red to imitate a rooster. He was the Red Rooster, and so they did what they could to make his appearance seem like a rooster, which was yet another instance of things I did not care for in the WWF at the time, and it made me, it kind of colored the way I viewed the company. It was often viewed as kind of cartoonish compared to what was the NWA/WCW. And it really affected my viewpoint on the company as a whole. And I really thought that doing things like they did with Dusty, like they did with Terry Taylor, to me, we've talked about missed opportunities. I thought they may have missed out on potential money-making opportunities, because as a fan, when I see that, I see it and it's okay, but that doesn't, I can't wait to go out and see the Red Rooster.
Right.
It's something that you do for a television joke, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, like he had a little thing with Bobby Heenan. Of course, Bobby Heenan was great. They had a little 2-minute match at WrestleMania, I believe. But Terry Taylor also, he was in line to be Mr. Perfect. You know what I mean? And it came down to him and Kurt Hennig who's going to be, and they decided to go with Kurt Hennig, and then he gets stuck with the Red Rooster.
Oh my goodness! You just put a mental image in my head that I did not want to see. What if? What if Kurt
Hennig had been the Red Rooster?
Oh.
So, for those of you who don't know, how old are you, Mark?
I'm 48.
Mark is 48, and I turned 40 today. So he's about 8 years older than me. So
yes.
There's some stuff that we talk about, like, in 88, when I was 7, You know what I mean? He would have been 15. So he has a little bit of recollection of some stuff, more of an adult recollection of some of the older stuff than I do. So that's kind of where we're going to differ a little bit on some stuff. But it's a good difference to have because we get kind of both the worlds, you know. So let's keep moving here. What about one that's who's what's the word I'm looking for? Geographically important to us would be the Honky Tonk Man.
Because one I actually enjoyed. To be honest.
Absolutely. But the Honky Tonk Man, the gimmick itself was a rib. It was a rib on Jerry Lawler, because first of all, Honky Tonk Man. If no one knows, Honky Tonk Man is actually Jerry Lawler's cousin, right? And he worked in the Memphis area as Wayne Ferris for many years, part of the Blonde Bombers and several other successful things. But when it came time for him to go to WWE, they gave him the Elvis gimmick, because
when you think about Memphis,
you're going to think about Elvis. So if Jerry Lawler's the king of Memphis, no. Let's show him who the real king is. Yeah, yes. That kind of thing. So that one, I didn't. Another thing, I didn't get that at the time, but as I got older, I realized that was it. And I heard a couple stories, obviously, and then. So that one, but like you said, that one actually worked. You know what I mean? He actually got over because you know how I am about Southern wrestling. He used Memphis in WWF, and it worked.
Well, it's amazing how when you take lessons that have worked in some places, that they often will work in another. And he did it, and he became what I still believe to be the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. Now, not because he was the greatest in-ring performer to ever hold the title, but because he said it and it became so much of the character and the, coming to the ring in a pink Cadillac.
Driven by Diamond Dallas Page.
Exactly.
Owned by Diamond Dallas Page.
And I want to say it was WrestleMania 6.
Yeah, it was 6.
It was WrestleMania 6.
In Toronto.
In Toronto. For those of you who want to look back, the person driving that pink Cadillac was Diamond Dallas Page. And it was just so great. And he really made that what seemed like maybe a joke or a throwaway kind of thing, but he made it a very long-lasting, successful character that was very effective.
Yeah, and if we're going to stick with the Jerry Lawler, this wasn't the first time that they ribbed Jerry Lawler for some reason. So the original Harley Race being the king, was obviously a dig at Lawler too. Like, you think you're the king of wrestling? We got Harley Race.
Yeah, we're going to crown a king of our own.
We're going to crown a king of our own, and here it is. And I'm not sure, because I'm not sure what the thing was, because Vince and Jerry Jarrett had a really good relationship.
Well, sure.
Because Jerry really never tried to compete with Vince at all. He just wanted to run Memphis and do his own thing. And obviously when Vince was in trouble with the the federal government, and it was a possibility he might go to federal prison, Jerry Jarrett was handpicked to run WWF while Vince was away. I'm using quotation fingers right now.
Yeah, had that come to pass, yes.
Yeah, had that come to pass, he would have been. So, I don't know what the heat was that early on with Lawler and them, or if it was just, I don't know. But it was interesting to see that play out.
Well, could I say it's, in a weird way, almost a sign of respect? Because Dusty Rhodes, in addition to being a tremendous in-ring performer, was heavily involved in the management of the WCW, NWA. He was known to be the booker there. Mm-hmm. And much the same way, Jerry Lawler was clearly heavily involved in the management of the Memphis Riddler. And so I might say that maybe these were people that Vince viewed and respected for the jobs they did in making their respective promotions successful. And this was his weird way of kind of being respectful to what they were able to do.
I don't think so.
I'm really. I know I'm reaching.
You're grasping at straws.
I'm trying to be positive here.
Yeah. I don't. It's more or less it's a joke of some kind. I'm not sure exactly what his issue with Lawler and Memphis. He always had an issue with Southern people anyway. He has an issue with, and that's obvious through professional wrestling. So maybe that was just a dig at that, because every time there's someone from the South, they're inevitably some kind of hillbilly.
Well, I have a tendency to pay attention to announcing in wrestling for various reasons. And I always thought that played into the presentation of Jim Ross. I will often say Jim Ross is one of my holy trinity of wrestling announcers. And I will tell you, I'm a great fan of Jim Ross, not necessarily good old JR.
Right.
Because to me, good old JR was a pro wrestling gimmick uh, and created by the WWE because that's the way they viewed him because he was from the southern part of the country. Granted, he's Oklahoma, but he made his way up through working in the Mid-South area with Bill Watts and then with WCW. So he had a southern background.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, we've seen it time and time again with like you said, with the South and things like that. They're always like Jamie Noble. Jamie Noble is from West Virginia, which isn't necessarily the South, but like it's not New York. You know what I mean? So
it's something they view as rural.
Yeah, so it's gonna be he's gonna be trailer park trash.
Exactly.
Pretty much, stuff like that. So they tend to do that. Jeff Jarrett was another one that obviously, he's from Nashville. He's got to be a country music. Yeah, got to be a country star. Stuff like that. We can go back to Dusty for a second on this one too. Something you mentioned before we got on the air was Ted DiBiase and Virgil.
Oh, now this is actually one of my favorites. And what I'll say is, part of the reason this appeals to me is because when it happened, it really never crossed my mind that's what it was about. And I think that's what makes it effective. It was in effect an inside joke. The audience wouldn't necessarily get it, and it wouldn't affect their enjoyment of the program. If it's that blatant, then it becomes something that to me is counter to what you're actually trying to do, which is entertain an audience on television. And if you don't mind me kind of going on this, as we all know, I did look. The gentleman's name was Mike Jones. Is the performer's name?
He wasn't. He was something in Memphis though. He was something else Jones in Memphis.
Oh yes, because he had appeared there, and his in-ring name has eluded me.
It wasn't. No, there was an SD Jones, obviously. But,
yeah, that was in WWF, and
I almost want to say he was SD Jones in Memphis. Oh.
He might well have been, but it was something. It was something along those lines. But in any event, when he came to the WWF, they were going to pair him with Ted DiBiase. Obviously, the $1 Million Man, had gimmick, persona. I'll say persona instead of gimmick.
Soul Train Jones.
Soul Train Jones. All right, very good. So they had Mike Jones, Soul Train Jones, and they wanted to bring him in, and their idea was to pair him with the $1 Million Man, and it kind of makes sense to kind of emphasize the opulence and the wealth of the $1 Million Man. Then obviously he would have a butler or a bodyguard, as he was referred to as both from time to time. But when they decided, well, what name should we give him, he came to be known as Virgil. Now, it did not register with me at the time why they chose the name Virgil, but for those of you who do not know, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes' legal name is Virgil Runnels. And so this was another chance to kind of take a dig at Dusty, have the person serving as the butler for the $1 Million Man be named Virgil. And at the time, it went by. Now, over time, when I later learned that, I understood it, and I thought it was okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely one of the ones, like we talked about, that worked. You know what I mean? It was, and like I said, it was an inside joke, so it wasn't on the surface where everyone could know what was going on. So that was the thing too. Another one that was obviously not as popular as that one. We want to say something else about that?
Just to kind of cap off the story,
sure.
there was a bit of revenge here, because as you all remember, the $1 Million Man made his way to WCW during the NWO era and came to be known as Trillionaire Ted, etc. Yeah. Well, Mike Jones also came to WCW during that time period, along with the $1 Million Man, to kind of continue the act they had that was so successful over the years. And he came to be known as Vincent.
Mm-hmm.
For at the time, I did not really think about it, but that's obviously Vince McMahon, a reference to Vince McMahon. Nice. And so I thought that was kind of Dusty, kind of giving back as good as he got.
Yeah, that's not bad. I didn't think about that either. So that's a good little catch. Another one that's kind of along those same lines is Simon Dean. Simon Dean was a play on Dean Malenko's real name, which is Dean Simon.
Ah.
And they just switched it around, and that's where Simon Dean became. He was the guru and stuff like that. But
Sure.
the name itself was a rib on
Okay, well,
Dean
that's
Malenko.
one I had missed out on.
Yeah. So there's stuff like that, and then obviously, and there's ribs like Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger, obviously has a lisp, right? And for some reason, WWE felt an unnecessary need to give him way too much promo time.
Sure.
To have him go out there and just basically, you can't take someone seriously. No matter, he's a badass. Let's not.
No, he's a legit athlete.
He's a legit athlete and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like I think that diminished his overall projection for things because it was like, who's this guy? The guy that has a lisp.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think he would have been much better served with a Paul Heyman-esque type person to do his bidding for him.
Right, to carry that part.
And actually, that was probably his most over he got was when he was with Dirty Dutch.
Right, doing the We the People.
Yeah, Zeb Coulter.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's another one.
Well, and there is my frustration because it seems to me that sometimes, and hey, these are human beings, sometimes they kind of lose sight of what their real goal is. Your real goal is to put on the best show, the best performance for an audience to draw as many tickets and draw as many viewers as you can. And you have a talent who may be able to help you do that, and you kind of use them in such a way that you don't maximize what you're getting out of this guy that you're going to be paying. And as a fan, I find that really disappointing, I'll say.
Right. And okay, let me go into a little local wrestling here, to kind of, because this kind of goes with the Jack Swagger thing. I had a trainee at one point. He was a really good kid, but he had a lazy eye. He had a speech impediment. If you talked to him, you would have thought that he had some kind of mental deficiency.
Sure.
Right? But he actually was a really smart kid, did well in school, actually had an amateur wrestling background in school and stuff like that. So when it came time for him to be a wrestler, it's like, okay, wrestling it's such about what's being projected, right? So if they would have saw the cross eye or the speech impediment and hurl it, then you'd have to basically steer into that type of gimmick. Perception is reality. Like, if this is what they believe, then this is what the direction we have to go. So I didn't want to really do that to him. So for me, we put him in a mask and we gave him a wrestling gimmick. You know what I mean? Like an old school wrestler gimmick. And it really worked really well. And he did a really good job with it. And then, of course, after a while, like everything does, someone got in his ear and said, hey, you don't have to be here. You can go wrestle wherever you want. You can do this. So eventually he left. And when he left, within probably the first week or two, whoever he was wrestling for had him unmask and cut a promo on Facebook with his speech impediment, with his cross eye, with everything like that. And the entire comments under it were just roasting him.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, some of this stuff is it's. I don't know if the bookers who made that decision were trying to rib him, or maybe they were trying to rib me. You know what I mean? Or maybe they're just too stupid to know the difference. You know what I mean? But either way, it didn't work.
Well, it doesn't. To me, it looks like you're doing a disservice to the performer, to your own promotion, and that's very disappointing. And that's bordering on unprofessional.
Yeah, I mean, I it is what it is. I mean, I'm not upset about it.
Well, it's
now.
not the first time those sorts of things have happened.
No. That's kind of the way the business goes. You help someone, you break them in, and eventually they bite your hand at some point, and then they go away, and then they apologize and come back, and it's
part of. But let me just say from a national level. Let me see how you appeal to this. It was kind of like the way after Kevin Nash and Scott Hall left and went to WCW. There was an introduction, which was done by Jim Ross, as I recall. One of my not highlights of the great Jim Ross is he was used as the means of introducing a new Razor Ramon and a new Diesel.
right.
Which they just took the former gimmicks that they had used for those two wrestlers and just gave them to two other people and I don't know what they were trying to do. Were they trying to make fun of Hall and Nash? To me, it looked like they were petty. These two guys, they obviously thought a lot of, left and went to the other company. And so it's like they were almost, just kind of sour grapes at the idea that those two guys had left. And I thought it was a disservice to their own company.
Well, that and it ended up working out really, really well for Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, because when WWE announced, hey, Diesel and Razor Ramon are going to be on Raw next week, right? Mm-hmm. WCW freaked out,
right,
and they threw more money at Kevin Nash and Scott Hall to make sure they didn't jump, even though they were under contract. I don't know why they thought they would have jumped or whatever. Or maybe they just thought they were so outlaws, they would have done.
They might try to.
They might try it anyway. So I think, man, I can't remember how much Kevin Nash said, but I want to say it was almost like $400,000 or like $500 extra grand they got in their contract for not jumping. You know what I mean? And then the next week, they're all in gorilla watching Raw,
right?
And these two fake guys come out and they're like, like the guys in WCW had been had.
Well, I mean, hey, well, good for Hall and Nash, I guess. But the ultimate thing is, I thought did things like that, would it not also be doing a disservice to the two wrestlers you saddled with that? Because now they're forever going to be known with that.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, they've got a job, they're making a living, but yeah, at the same time, that's an impossible thing to get over. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If they would have made that work, that would have been one of the greatest stories in wrestling history. That they were able to take those two gimmicks and reinvent them, and
I would have been amazed.
It would have been almost damn near impossible. But we can wish, can't we?
Oh, sure.
Let's see. What's another one? Well, here's one that, and these are okay. Let's go to Jim Herd for a second. Now, see, I listened to an interview with Jim Herd where he got to explain some of this stuff, and he said that some of these ideas that he had were just random ideas that he was throwing out in meetings that he was never actually serious about them. But I doubt that sometimes. I think some of this stuff was serious. One of the main ones that with him was he wanted to have a hunchback wrestler. And the thought process being you can't pin a hunchback because you can't get both shoulders on the mat, so he can't be defeated.
Oh.
You know how we talk about some things translate to professional wrestling and some things don't?
Yeah, that would be
the hunchback does not translate to wrestling.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry. That one's... I need a second to gather myself. I had not heard that one, and I'm almost...
You never heard that one?
No, and I'm almost sad that I did now, but...
Have you ever heard this one? This is going to be... I'm sure you've heard...
Okay, you're going to top that one?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So, he had a big deal with Ric Flair.
Sure.
Okay. So, apparently he pitched the idea of cutting Ric Flair's hair and changing his name to Spartacus. You never heard that one?
No, I'd not heard that.
Yeah, at that time, he was at least a 10 or 11 time world champion. And, that was, he needs something different. He's too, it's passe, it's old. But why give him a Spartacus? That doesn't make any sense either.
Now, these were both from the mind of Jim Herd, is that correct?
Yes.
I have oft heard...
he also came up with the ding-dongs, but we don't have to talk about that either.
I've often heard the era of Jim Herd criticized.
Yeah.
And I'd never known if it was really fair or not.
Well, I got to hear, like I said, there's an interview with him and the guy that does Arns. What's his name? Conrad?
Yes.
There's an interview with him and Jim Herd, and it's 2 hours long. So you get to hear a lot of the things he was having to deal with. And I understand some of it, but I think from a creative standpoint, he was not on the mark at all. He may have knew how to run a business, but to run a wrestling business creatively was different.
Well, maybe he could have just run the business and left these other things to the side. Even suggest them as, makes me groan. Okay. But I do understand how someone involved with the creative portion, when hearing these ideas, would, get a pretty negative viewpoint on the gentleman.
All right. So let's get, here's one that really bothers me. And this is really one that's bothered me for many years. And it's WWE, WWE's, I guess, how they ignored Zack Ryder.
Oh. Okay.
Because I mean, like we said before, Zack Ryder, he'd done a YouTube show and kind of got himself over, and people were talking about him, got a buzz for himself, and like it got to the point to where people were chanting his name when he wasn't even out there. And like I've said before, that's a very special thing in wrestling. That doesn't happen with just
Right.
anybody. That happens with the the over of the over.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And they just basically were like, no, not happening, not your time. You know what I mean? And it's like you have to ride some of those waves because like they actually did a thing where like they were in Madison Square Garden, and for weeks people were like, "Oh, Ryder's going to do something huge at the Garden," blah blah blah.
Sure.
And then he wasn't even on the show at all. They completely like they were chanting his name all night long, and then they didn't even give him Zack Ryder. You know what I mean? If Zack Ryder would have came out at the end of that night and saved John Cena or did something big like that, he would have been the biggest babyface in WWE and could have gave them a shot in the arm going forward. But like they just completely, hammered it and said no, we're not doing it.
Well, that leads me back to something I brought up before, where, and this may be a failing. Ultimately, when I criticize the WWE, it's a criticism of Vince McMahon. I've often heard it said that when in the WWE, you're performing for an audience of one.
Yeah.
And so we're back at this point where and I believe it was True Long Island Story or something like that was what his YouTube show was, that really did gain in following. And it's almost, well, it's not my idea or our idea, if you want to talk about creative, therefore we're not going to run with it.
Right. But then, and that's what they did. They eventually had him start doing the YouTube show for their stuff.
Right.
And but then
it was kind of
pushed to the side. Then eventually they just didn't do it anymore. And like they just everything he had built, they just kind of tore down brick by brick. So here's another one. What about so I don't know if you remember, like there was an angle where John Cena was stabbed by Carlito's cousin.
okay.
You remember that vaguely?
No, this one has eluded me. I don't recall this one right off.
Yeah, it was 2000, I don't know, 6, 7, 5,
All
6,
right.
7, somewhere in there, I think. And the whole thing was, John Cena was stabbed in a nightclub by Jesus, who ended up being Carlito's cousin, blah, blah, blah. Well, this was actually a direct play on Johnny Devine, the TNA wrestler from Team Canada and things like that. He was actually legitimately stabbed in a nightclub, like just like a couple months before that.
Okay.
And they used it very
blatantly,
tastelessly.
Okay.
In this angle, and that's one of the things. Like, why even joke about something like that, or why even use that?
It kind of defies reason, because I don't know frankly, that seems a little mean-spirited to be as nice as I can be about it. And it's not going to, I don't see it really paying off for your promotion to a great degree.
It was basically just like a one-off thing to get to the pay-per-view too. Like it really wasn't even. It wasn't this big, huge, heated angle or anything like that. It was just like, okay, we can write this into television.
Here's something we can emphasize.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a part of. They've often been criticized or critiqued, however you want to view it, with Raw and SmackDown in particular, things being put together at the last moment. I've often heard rumors of, the show being rewritten right up till the show starts, or sometimes even after it starts, segments being rewritten. And to me, it seems like if you had thought about that for a moment, you might have said, hey, maybe that's something we shouldn't do.
All right, so let's get this one last one in.
All right.
And this one's going to be a doozy. So, WWE's Gilbert.
Okay. This is one I would like to say I didn't like this one, but I'm not a great liar.
Right.
And I would be lying to everyone in this audience if I said I did not laugh at that one the first time I saw it. I have admitted I was never a tremendous Goldberg fan, and I will admit I did get a kick out of this one.
Yeah, this one was really fun for a lot of levels. I mean, this is where we talk about where comedy is good in wrestling. You know what I mean? This was obviously, here's a guy who's legitimately half the size.
Maybe
a third the size of the real Goldberg, and here he comes out mimicking him just because he's bald head and had a goatee. And the only thing that really, obviously people were upset about was the, because Goldberg has Tourette's, and like they felt like he was mimicking his Tourette's too and making fun of his Tourette's, which maybe yes, maybe no, but whatever it was. But either way, he did a really good job at capturing the essence of Goldberg, and with the sparklers and just the random stuff that they had going on during that time.
Well, I was not aware that Goldberg had Tourette's, and I certainly didn't see that angle of it. I just simply saw, the things that I thought were, a little bit questionable about Goldberg's portrayal as a character. Now, as I recall, they also kind of put a magic marker to mimic the tattoos that Goldberg has on Goldberg's arm, because the tattoo, there was a tattoo, and I want to say it's on his left arm, but that Goldberg used that kind of became kind of his trademark and was part of his a symbol that you saw when his name was put up, and so I saw that, and it looked really silly. And then the sparklers, as opposed to the the shower of sparks, where Goldberg would breathe in and then literally breathe smoke on the stage, and then to see that and him kind of wincing at it as the sparklers were at.
I think they had to put him out with a fire extinguisher at one point because he was getting burned or something. But and the Goldberg, Goldberg's got a lot of comic fodder, because we also got Jericho and Ralphus out of the Goldberg scenario too.
I was a big Ralphus fan.
Yeah, I mean that was really, and like Jericho talks about, like he took an idea and he made it work, and people wanted to see that match, no matter if it was 30 seconds or 40 seconds or whatever it been, they wanted to see it, and it was his ideas and things that did. And like I said, they didn't ever pay off with it. Like it was never actually even a match, I don't think.
I had heard Jericho mention that it was something he really wanted to, bring to fruition, to have that match. And Ralphus worked as the security, which was always around when Goldberg needed an escort to the ring, and so Ralphus became that for Jericho.
And then you have to go listen to Talk is Jericho, because he talks about how a whole thing with Ralphus and how he ended up having to try to get out. He ended up getting Ralphus an actual contract to get more money, because he was actually a truck driver that drove to the show.
Drove the ring?
That drove the ring and whatever equipment.
Sure.
So he would just show up on house shows.
He was there anyway.
Well, no, he wasn't supposed. He was only supposed to be at TV.
Okay.
But he would show up to the house shows and I'm booked, and like. So he would just go out with Jericho, and then Jericho eventually talked to the office like, "Hey, can we get this guy a little bit of money?" So I think they ended up paying him
for what he's doing
for $500-600 a week or something like that.
Sure.
And he was just Ralphus, It was just the most random thing. But anyway, we are way over time and we're at 38 minutes right now. So that's woo.
We have to call this call.
We have to call this one. So for myself, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and my co-hosts, the Memphis Dream, Mark Tipton.
Thank you.
Thank you, and goodbye.